fellow guitar slingers, you know it's time to stop crawling around down there in the pentatonic gutter and box number 1. You know which one I'm talking about, right? Yes, that's the one. I call it the scale shape that we all love to hate. Because for over 25 years now, it's been the number one reason why hundreds of students has come to me for help. To break free from this old pattern and expand new possibilities on the fretboard. So, the scale shape that we love to hate. But let's be fair, okay? It's not such a bad tool when you're first starting out. It feels pretty good on your fingers and you can squeeze some decent sounds out of it for sure. But I'm certain that most of you guys, just like myself, want to be a little bit more adventurous, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do in this course. And we are going to do this in 3 distinctive steps. Number 1, we're going to use what we already know in smarter ways, more efficient ways, and more fun ways. And number 2, we're going to use what we already know and start moving it around on the fretboard to finally be able to play all over the fretboard. And number 3, we add a couple of notes to create some more color and flow in our solo playing. So in this course, I'm helping you to start moving beyond your limitations, to expand and explore new possibilities on the guitar. So don't stay down there in the pentatonic gutter of box number 1. Click the link and let's get to work. We're going to play all over the fretboard now. It's going to be great. Click the link and I'll see you inside the course. Hello fellow guitar slingers and welcome to lesson number 1. You know, the most effective way to break free from your old habits of just climbing up and down the scales in one position, one direction like this, is to teach your fingers new combinations of movements, new patterns of movements. And the superior method that we are going to use for that in this course is called sequences, which means playing small patterns of notes, small series of notes, moving up and down the scale. And now I'm going to show you an example of this. And in this course, I have strategically picked out a number of sequences that together make up the most efficient way to master this. And there is of course an infinite number of sequences for different purposes, but more about that in my other courses. And we are going to start here by checking out a sequence of 5 notes. So we play 5 notes, starting on the first note of the scale down here on fret 5 on the low E string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we move back to the second note of the scale here on fret 8, and we play 5 notes up the scale starting on that note. Then we go back down to the third note and play 5 notes from that. And the same thing from note number 4. And so on and so forth. And the very first thing to do when getting started with any exercise is of course to, at your own pace, taking your time, just figuring out the fingering and any difficult passages maybe or other challenges, so that your fingers knows exactly what it is we want them to do. And then when we got a good grip on this exercise, we start using a metronome. And these days you can find a metronome in any smartphone or tablet or in your computer if you don't want to buy another piece of gear. So we then start playing without interruption just continuing up the scale pattern all the way to the top. So I play and then we do the same thing starting on the highest note, coming down the scale. So we start up here on the 8th fret on the high E string with our little finger, and we play 5 notes down the scale. And then we come back up to the 2nd note of the scale up here on the 5th fret, and we play 5 notes from there downwards. And then note number 3, playing 5 notes descending from that note. Note number 4, same thing. And we continue like that all the way down the scale. And then again we take our metronome and play in time a sequence of 5 notes descending. Okay, so now we're going to play a sequence that I call every other note. We start from the top note of the scale this time, fret 8 on the high E string with our little finger. And immediately we jump from there down to the next string on the same fret. So now we have skipped one note. Then we come back up to the 2nd note of the scale. So we skip the next note and jump down to note number 4, fret 5 on the B string. And repeat that pattern, playing every other note of the scale. We then repeat this pattern ascending, coming up the scale, starting on the lowest note at fret 5 on the low E string, and then jump up to fret 5 on the A string, skipping one note. And then we come back down to the 2nd note on the 8th fret on the low E string, and jump from there up to the 4th note, and we keep going like that up the scale. Now we're going to play what is called a hammer-on pull-off sequence. So once again, we start on the lowest note of the scale position, fret 5 on the low E string, and we pick that note with our picking hand. And then we hammer with the tip of our little finger onto the string on fret 8 without picking it with our picking hand, coming straight from above down onto the string, avoiding the finger going flat or collapsing, just coming from above with our fingertip. And then we come back up to the next note of the scale, 5th fret on the A string, picking that note with our picking hand. So this is going to be groups of 3 notes. And we will move up the scale one string at a time instead of like in the sequences before where we moved up one note at a time. So we're repeating this pattern all the way up the scale. And when we have this pattern sorted out, we again start playing without interruption. And our goal is that all the notes should be equally long and equally strong. And now it's time to play downwards from the high E string using a pull-off exercise. So we start with our little finger on the 8th fret on the high E string, and we make a pull-off down to the 5th fret where the first finger is waiting to catch the note. So with our little finger pressed down on the 8th fret, we now let the string go by pulling it downwards and snapping it off. And then we come down and play the next note of the scale, picking it with our picking hand on the 8th fret. So again, a group of 3 notes that we keep moving down one string at a time. And when we're ready to get a bit fancy, we can combine the 2 patterns, the ascending hammer-on pattern with a descending pull-off pattern, like this. So, we reached the end of this lesson. Great job! And I hope that you felt a bit inspired and maybe a bit challenged. So download the backing track and play using that. It's very important to find a balance between practicing, memorizing scales, playing to a metronome and things like that, like exercise stuff, and to play together with music and just explore and having fun. So a nice balance between practicing and playing is very important and effective. Pick up the guitar as often as you can. Playing long sessions is not as effective as playing often and frequently. But I will get back to those tips and tricks about learning and being effective later on in my other courses. So in the next lesson we will add a couple of notes to get some more color into our solos and some more flow. So until then, have fun and keep those strings ringing, okay? Hello fellow guitar slingers, and welcome to lesson number 2. In the last lesson we looked at new ways of using the stuff that we already know to move in new ways in a familiar scale shape. And we learned some strategic sequences that helps us to break free from our old habits of being stuck in our playing. So in this lesson we are going to add a couple of notes, what I call color tones. So this is an introduction to my method, the color tone concept. And we do this to create some more color and some more flow in our solo playing, and to find inspiration to come up with new ideas and new phrases. So more variation, more fun, and hopefully a bit more enjoyable to listen to as well. And these notes can be found in many different locations on the fretboard, but since this is a practical course in solo playing, focusing mainly on blues and rock playing, we're going to use these notes only where they're easy to reach and feel natural in this style of guitar playing, and not where they mess up the fingering and create obstacles. And you can of course use all the material in this course in any musical genre, any musical style, but the examples and the backing track is blues oriented. So let's get to work. We are going to start out by simply learning how to play this new extended scale shape straight up and down. And then later on we will take a look at some licks that will make our fingers put these new notes and movements to use spontaneously. So the first note we're going to add, the first color tone, is often called the blue note or the blues note. And in this course it will be the note E flat or D sharp. And it's a lowered 5th or a raised 4th depending on how we look at it, but more about that kind of theoretical stuff in my other courses, because this is a hands-on course. So let's add color tone number 1, and in this box it's located here on the fretboard. There it is. And you can also find it up here. There it is. And down here again. So we practice this until we can play it in our sleep, and then we come back and start looking at some licks. We start on this note. Again. And one more time. So download the backing track and practice using that. And as I always remind my students, it's important to find a balance between practicing and playing. For example, spending time memorizing and getting the technique sorted out, and then just checking out how it can be put to use in a musical context. So here's another lick starting on the lowest note of the scale. And here's lick number 3. It starts further up the scale, where we have our blues note located here on fret number 8. So I play. And here's lick number 4. And a variation of that. Here comes lick number 5. Not very complicated, so it can be put to use right away. So now we are going to add color tone number 2. It's located here on the same fret as the first color tone, the blues note, but on the D string. It can be found up here as well, and here. But it's a bit tricky to reach those notes, so we just skip them in this course. We want to be practical and get quick results, being able to put this stuff to use immediately. So, coming from above, descending. So here is a lick where we use both our color tones here in the lower register. We play. Here's lick number 7. It's a descending lick, and we're using our hammer-on pull-off technique that we learned in lesson number 1. Coming from above. Hammer on, pull off. So that's all for this lesson, and as always I hope you felt inspired and maybe a bit challenged. Download the backing track and play over that. Remember the balance between practicing and playing, both are very important. So practice, memorize and work on your technique, but also explore, have fun, just fool around on the guitar. Pick up the guitar as often as you can. Long sessions are not as effective as playing often and frequently. But more about that kind of stuff in other courses. In our next lesson we will finally break free from this box number 1 and start conquering the rest of the fretboard. So until then, have fun and keep those strings ringing, okay? Hello fellow guitar slingers, and welcome to lesson number 3. In the last lesson we added a couple of new notes to our scale to create some more variation, some more color, some more flow into our playing, and to help us to come up with some new ideas. And we checked out some licks as a starting point to creating our own licks. And now the time has finally come. It's time to break free from this box number 1 and start moving around on the fretboard. And the first thing that we're going to do is to move to the left to the next adjacent position, the next box on the fretboard. And then we will of course add our color tones in this new box, this new position as well. And further on down the road, we will be able to use all these 7 notes wherever we happen to be on the fretboard. But that is of course a long time goal. There will be some licks as well at the end of this lesson. So let's get to work. So now we are going to move to a new box, another position on the fretboard, which means playing the same notes in a different location. And this box, this position, is called box number 5. So let's check that out. We will start with our first finger on the 3rd fret down here on the low E string. And then the 3rd finger on fret 5. And you can look at the tab to check out the fingering. Next we use our little finger here to be able to reach the 2nd fret with our 1st finger. Then we don't have to stretch so much like this. So 1st finger, 3rd finger, 1st finger, little finger, 1st finger, little finger, 1st finger, little finger, 1st finger, 3rd finger, 1st finger and 3rd finger. And when we have practiced this until we feel confident and we get it right every time, then we apply the sequences that we learned in the first lesson to this new box. For example, our 5-note sequence. And coming from above, descending. Then we start adding our color tones. The first place we find a color tone is immediately after playing the first note, here on the 4th fret. And the same note can be found up here and here. But as you can see, when I try to reach those notes, it's a bit tricky and not very comfortable. So I will simply skip those notes, since in this course we're only going to use what feels comfortable and natural. And here's that blues note again. And up here we have one as well. Coming down the scale, there is a color tone here. Here's another one. And finally down here. So let's check out the lick. We're using the blues note, fret 4 on the B string. And in this lick I will use our hammer-on pull-off technique again, and both our color tones. And I suggest that you first practice this lick, trying to get all the notes equally strong and equally long. Then you can start adding some dynamics, putting some extra pressure on some notes, like this. So here's a lick starting in the lower register. And by the way, feel free to check out some hammer-ons and pull-offs wherever you want and wherever you feel like it. For example here, where you have the same fingering on 2 adjacent strings. So that's all for this lesson. Pick up the guitar as often as you can, practice slowly and really try to get it right every time. That's crucial for your development as a guitar player. And in the next lesson we will learn how to move between those two boxes, those two positions, in a more musical, melodic and smooth way, using small transitions that I call bridges. So then you will get a taste of my fretboard freedom format. So until then, have fun with the guitar and keep those strings ringing, okay? Hello again, fellow guitar slingers, and welcome to lesson number 4. In the last lesson we learned how to break free and move out of this old, perhaps somewhat boring blues box and start spreading out over the fretboard. We learned a new box, and then we added our 2 color tones in that new box as well. And then we of course checked out some licks. And in this lesson we are going to learn a different way of moving between those 2 boxes, those 2 positions, so that they finally become like one larger, wider box, so to speak. And we will create small patterns that glues the boxes together, acting as bridges between the positions. And I call them just that, bridges, so that those transitions sounds musical, melodical, and actually sound like we're moving freely across the fretboard, and not just playing in one box for a while and then jumping to another box and get stuck there. We want flow, right? And the first bridge looks like this. And this first bridge is really not that complicated, but that's not to say that it's necessarily easy. It does of course require some time, focus and energy, especially if you want to get it right every time. So we simply slide down or up on each string from one box to the next. So we start up here in the first box, we play 2 notes, and then we slide down to the next box and continue to play the next 2 notes in that box, coming down the scale. Then we repeat this pattern starting on the next string. So again we start in the first box and slide down, and the next string sliding down, sliding down until we reach the last note. Then we repeat this pattern but reversed, going up the scale. So now we start in the lowest box, box 5, and we work our way up to box number 1, like this. Sliding up, sliding up, sliding up, sliding up, sliding up. And in bridge number 2 we're going to use a small piece of a sequence to create a transition that sounds a bit more musical and melodic. It sounds like this. So we start down here on the low E string in box 5, and then when we come up to the A string we slide up to box number 1. And then we repeat that pattern starting on the A string, the D string, the G string, and then finally the B string. And coming down the scale it looks like this. Then we continue that pattern, moving down one string at a time. So that concludes this lesson, and as always I hope you felt a bit inspired and maybe slightly challenged. Use the backing track frequently, find that balance between practicing and playing, which may be a bit different from one day to another. And remember, when practicing our goal is to get it right every time, so make sure you're playing at the right tempo and remember to pick up the guitar as often as you can. In the next lesson there will be a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and some extra material, some licks and some exercises. So until then, have fun with the guitar and don't forget to keep those strings ringing, okay? Welcome fellow guitar slinger to the 5th and last lesson of this course. So in this lesson there will be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. There will be some new licks and other specialties. There will also be some examples of technique exercises that is going to help you. And we're going to start with what I call the Clapton box. It's one of his specialties that he's using all the time. He's playing over 3 boxes, or parts of 3 boxes, you might say. And it looks like this. And countless guitarists has been using this pattern for ages. And it's a great platform when it comes to playing blues and rock phrases. It immediately feels great under your fingers. Now I will give you an example of a string bending exercise, because bending strings is such an essential component to this kind of solo playing, and to find those tasty bends that really spice up your phrasing. And there's a lot of benefits doing this exercise. It will strengthen your fingers, you will develop thick and rough skin on your fingertips, which will help you to get a firm grip on the strings. And that is something really valuable in this style of playing, or in any style of playing for that matter. It also helps you to find the perfect pitch when bending, to keep in tune, so to speak. So we start up here on the highest note on fret 8 on the high E string. And if we have the strength for it, then we can use our little finger. Otherwise we will use our 3rd finger. And we will use all our other fingers as support for maximum strength. And bend the string upwards. And we want to reach this note 1 whole step above, which is the same as 2 frets. And then we release the bend down to the original pitch, the original note on fret 8. Followed by a pull-off down to the 5th fret, where our 1st finger is waiting to catch the string. Then we do the same thing on the B string. And we repeat this on the G string, the only difference being that now we use our 3rd finger on fret 7. Instead of our little finger at fret 8 to follow the scale pattern. And the same thing on the D string, the only difference being that now we bend downwards towards the floor, since we always want to bend towards the center of the fretboard, not towards the edges. And just like before on the other strings, we bend the string a whole tone. And then the A string. And finally the low E string, where we again use our little finger on fret 8. And as I mentioned, we always bend towards the center of the neck. Same thing on the top strings. So up here we bend upwards, and down here we bend downwards, avoiding the risk of sliding off the fretboard. So we have reached the end of this course, and I want to thank you so very much for participating. And as always, I hope you were inspired and a bit challenged. And just one more reminder of some key points when it comes to developing as a guitar player, making it as much fun and as easy as possible. The balance between practicing and playing. On one hand, exercises where we can measure our results, and on the other hand, just playing for fun to find inspiration and joy, just exploring to see what happens. Pick up the guitar as often as you can. Long sessions are not as effective as playing frequently. Nothing wrong with playing long sessions, they can be rewarding, but playing often is really the magic key. We want to become one with the instrument, so then we need to pick it up as often as possible, keeping those strings ringing, right? And if you want to learn how to play fast, then practice slowly. It's crucial to get it right every time, especially when you're starting out with a new scale shape or an exercise or a lick or something like that. The first 10 to 20 times you play that new piece is critical. If you keep repeating mistakes, then you will have to struggle correcting them for quite some time, and that creates a totally different feeling. So practice slowly and be meticulous, okay? So once again, have fun with this wonderful instrument and keep those strings ringing, okay?